From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Carla Gonzalez. We start in Brazil, where massive protests have been held after federal judge Sergio Moro ordered the arrest of former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Thousands of Lula supporters gather outside the Metal Workers Union in São Bernardo to urge the former president to resist. They also vowed they will remain on the streets in an attempt to avoid his arrest. Moro gave Lula until 5 p.m. on Friday to turn himself in to the federal police in Curitiba. The detention order comes after Brazil's Supreme Court narrowly rejected Lula's petition for habeas corpus, which would have allowed him to remain free while he fights his 12-year prison sentence for corruption.
Today is a very sad day, but we are here to resist. The most important thing is to show the strength of Lula as a leader and of the PT as a political party.
People will go in the street. People will come tomorrow and will let anyone enter to get him out. It's his house. No one will get him out. It won't be as easy as they want it to be.
Former President Dilma Rousseff spoke to the crowd in defense of Lula. She denounced the Supreme Court's decision and the arrest warrant as a violation of Lula's rights and the country's constitution. Rousseff said after learning about the arrest order, she has decided to run for the Senate for the state of Minas Gerais. The Workers' Party called for people to remain on the streets to defend Lula's right to run in the October election.
They want to erase Brazil's history, to gloss over what we did over the last 13 years during our terms in office.
It's evident this situation is illegal, and the defense will analyze and verify the possible measure we can take, because this is not compatible with the rule of law. It's not compatible with the federal constitution, because the constitution forbids implementing the punishment before the final and definitive guilty verdict, which does not exist in the case of President Lula.
Our correspondent Ignacio Lemus brings us more from the rally in support of Lula.
We're outside the Metalworkers Union in São Bernardo do Campo, on the outskirts of Sao Paulo. Here, several social movements, members of different political parties, supporters of the Workers' Party and its militants are gathering to support Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, after federal judge Sergio Moro issued an arrest warrant for Lula. This warrant comes after the Supreme Court denied the petition for habeas corpus filed by former President Lula and confirmed his 12-year sentence. Social movements have said they will remain outside the metalworkers' trade union, where Lula is now, to protect him from the police trying to detain him. Lula's supporters believe that democracy is at stake and that this is just a way to exclude Lula from the presidential race. Dilma Rousseff spoke to the crowd and denounced this attempt to eliminate Lula from the upcoming election. We'll keep you informed.
Ignacio Lemus from Sao Paulo. Earlier, we spoke to Brazil-based independent journalist Mike Fox in the wake of Judge Sergio Moro's decision to order the arrest of Lula. We asked him what Lula and the Workers' Party are likely to do next.
His defense team was going to deliver these resources, these kind of these smaller details within the judgment, and that was going to give him this extension until April 10th before. And then they would have to deliver that to Judge Sergio Moro. But obviously, we've seen that Judge Sergio Moro, he did not wait for that and basically said, let's move this game along. Now, I don't know what would happen if his defense team delivered those papers regardless. Would that then stop Sergio Moro and put an injunction on Lula's necessity to arrive there tomorrow at 5 p.m.? I don't think so. I think that Sergio Moro's made his decision, and Lula is now going to have to appear there at 5 p.m. The PT met with Lula in Sao Paulo, and out of that, one of the things that came out of it was to call for kind of a permanent mobilization outside of Lula's house in São Bernardo do Campo. So that's one of the things that's going to be happening over the next just hours. Already there's, people are calling for this on social media, whatever else. And like you said, people have been already arriving. So what does that mean? It's really hard to say. Does it mean that they're going to be defending Lula over the next 24 hours? And then he'll be arriving in Curitiba at 5 p.m. It's up in the air. His defense obviously will be trying to bring appeals before the Supreme Federal Court, and the Supreme Court of Justice. They're going to be trying to go back to the Supreme Federal Court and asking for the inconstitutionality of the sending someone to prison in their, after just one appeal. So this last time it was the inconstitutionality of Lula, and they want to open that up to a much broader issue. So that's one of the things that they will be discussing. But regarding his prison tomorrow, things, we're going to see what this looks like in the coming hours.
Panama is withdrawing its ambassador to Venezuela and has asked the Venezuelan government to do the same. In a statement, the Panamanian government said the reason for this measure was Venezuela's decision to suspend economic, commercial, and financial relations with certain Panamanian officials and companies for alleged involvement in money laundering. The Panamanian authorities say they are evaluating the impact of these measures in order to identify other possible future actions. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has responded to French President Emmanuel Macron's comments that May's election in Venezuela would not be free and fair. Maduro also spoke about the Summit of the Americas in Peru next week, saying that attending it is not his priority. He said some countries are conspiring to topple him and take control of Venezuela's oil resources.
Macron is destroying France. Macron was put into the French presidency to act as a hitman. Macron is a hitman for the interest of the financial oligarchy to destroy the social rights of the people of France. We are evaluating it. For me, it's not a priority to go there. The Summit of the Americas is a terrible waste of time. There's nothing discussed there that has anything to do with the lives of our people.
Social movements are warning that one of the objectives of the 8th Summit of the Americas in Peru is to revive the Free Trade Area of the Americas, or FtAA. For this reason, they plan to organize a parallel meeting called the People's Summit.
It's been 13 years since social organizations and progressive governments in the region decided to bury the Free Trade Area of the Americas.
Each of us brought an undertaker's shovel to dig the FtAA's tomb here in Mar del Plata.
Vamos a decirlo. Alca, al carajo.
4 summits later, in a different geopolitical scenario, the U.S. government is trying to revive the FtAA.
The FtAA did not completely die. It's been reassembled by the Pacific Alliance. And now, at the Summit of the Americas, they want to completely revive it. That former animosity or opposition to what is a free trade integration project has been somewhat reversed. This is, without doubt, thanks to certain geopolitical operations in Brazil, Honduras, Paraguay, and other countries.
Latin American activists agree that while the White House rearranged its backyard with a communications platform at its disposal, social organizations lowered their guard in their joint continental action. Now at the People's Summit, to be held in a parallel with the heads of the State Summit, they will reformulate their agenda.
This alternative summit gives us a chance to sit back surrounded by social movements, by popular movements, and establish communication channels. Governments and right-wing groups coordinate. They are well articulated, and so they can sign free trade treaties. On the other side, the people and their organizations are a little more introverted in their sectoral agendas, and you can see this clearly in Peru.
The organizing committee of the People's Summit say that in the final agreements of the meeting, they will promote socio-political integration through spaces such as Union of South American Nations, UNASUR, and the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC.
Ecuador's President Lenín Moreno said the rescue of the 2 journalists and their driver kidnapped at the border with Colombia 10 days ago is a high priority for his government. At a meeting with journalists, Moreno said he's committed to make every effort to bring in the 3 men back alive. As one of the demands, the kidnappers want an exchange with 3 of their members in prison in Ecuador. The journalist and their driver were kidnapped in the community of Mataje after they crossed a military checkpoint on their way to the border with Colombia. And in an effort to fight armed groups on the border with Colombia, Ecuadorian authorities arrested 9 people said to be involved in recent bomb attacks in the northern province of Esmeraldas. Interior Minister Cesar Navas confirmed that 4 suspects were detained in connection with the bombing in the community of Biche. 5 others, allegedly linked to the attack in the town of San Lorenzo, were also arrested. In total, the authorities have made 22 arrests. Authorities also announced that another soldier died from his injuries after a bomb attack on March 20th near the Colombian border. The armed forces confirmed Navy Wilmer Alvarez died from serious injuries caused by the blast. 4 people have died as a result of the attack and 2 more remain in the hospital. We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
Devolva a minha inocência, porque eu quero ser candidato.
Vamos começar assim. Golpistas, fascistas, não passarão! Golpistas, não passarão! Golpistas, fascistas...
Welcome back. In Guatemala, delegations of 20 countries have gathered in the city of Antigua for the first summit of high indigenous authorities of Iberoamerica.
During the summit, indigenous leaders talked about the main issues they have to deal with. Migration is one of them.
Migration has been happening for more than 20 years. Young indigenous people are leaving their territory because it lacks opportunities.
Extractivism affects their crops and cattle, and that's another factor that forced youngsters to leave their communities.
We demand respect for our lands and for our rights, because that's where we used to live, and many companies have tried to take our land from us.
The summit is also a way for indigenous peoples to stand together and fight for their rights.
They will listen, but we must stay together for that. They won't if we split.
I think that one of the main problems we deal with as young people and women is that our rights are constantly violated, and we are not respected for what we are, indigenous people.
According to the UN, 50 million indigenous people live in Latin America and the Caribbean. After this meeting, they already plan to present their demands in the next Ibero-American Summit, which is set for November.
Bolivia and China are taking steps towards a trade agreement that could have a huge impact on Bolivia's economy. Our correspondent Freddy Morales in La Paz has more.
Bolivia's and China's technical committees are making progress in laying the foundations for what in this country is being seen as an extremely important trade agreement, including the sale of food products to the Asian country. A visit by quality inspectors and quarantine officials from China has been confirmed for mid-April. They will come to Bolivia to evaluate the system of production and the quality of exports of Bolivian coffee and quinoa. Both countries are also analyzing the future for exports of beef and soy. These initial contacts should lead to the completion of a trade agreement. Next June, officials from both countries will meet again to finalize the agreement during President Evo Morales' official visit to China. Given the size of the Chinese market, with more than 1.3 billion citizens, achieving this deal is seen as revolutionary for Bolivia and for its agricultural production. Bolivia and China have a trade balance, which has been, for 5 years running, negative for Bolivia. The official data shows that in 2017, exports from Bolivia to China amounted to $401 million, while exports from China to Bolivia reached $2.27 billion, a deficit in Bolivia's trade balance of $1.6 billion. With this new trade agreement, the two countries seek to improve their economic cooperation.
That was Freddy Morales from La Paz. And still in Bolivia, families of the victims of the massacre in 2003 celebrated a verdict in a U.S. court which found the country's leaders at the time guilty.
Families of the victims of the October 2003 massacre were relieved at the decision from the United States Federal Court against Gonzalo Sánchez de Lozada and his former Minister of Defense, Carlos Sánchez Berzaín.
We have caught up with Gonzalo Sánchez de Lozada in a place where he thought he wasn't going to be found.
We have fought for 15 years, but it wasn't in vain. I have 7 children, and I have had to be a mother and a father to them because my husband was murdered in the massacre.
The ruling was issued by a civil trial by a federal court near Miami, where Sánchez de Lozada and Sánchez Berzaín faced the victims' families for the first time.
What's important is that a jury has said that they are responsible of the massacre. We achieved what we were looking for, and that can't be changed. We got justice today in the United States. The whole world knows that they are human rights violators.
The defense of the accused appealed against the verdict straight away and asked for its annulment. According to the plaintiffs, progress has been made, but the fight is not over.
They're resorting to a legal appeal. Then they can present a request to the United States Supreme Court of Justice. There are still things they can do.
2 extradition processes presented by Bolivia's foreign ministry were rejected by the United States, where the government protects accused politicians. The families trust this verdict will smooth the process for extradition.
Our goal is for them to go to jail. Every murder must be locked up.
He didn't want to get caught. We all know that. He's been running all over the world.
In October 2003, people gathered in the city of El Alto to reject the government's proposal to export natural gas. The protest was violently repressed for several days, with a total of 67 deaths and 400 injured. Sánchez de Lozada resigned and fled to the United States with his ministers.
In Barbados, the opposition Barbados Labour Party is demanding the Governor-General step in to call the election date. Barbados Parliament was dissolved on March 6 at the end of the 5-year term. The Constitution allows up to 3 months to hold elections. It appears Prime Minister Furendal Stewart is going down to the wire. The BLP is suggesting that Stewart might allow the time to lapse. Prime Minister Stewart has previously stated he intends to uphold the law and call elections within the stipulated time. Chilean police arrested 20 students who were striking against cuts to education, and they used water cannons to disperse the student protest. The mostly secondary school students, organized under the group Student Movement Against Commercial Education, marched down the main street of the capital, Santiago, blocking traffic. They are calling on the government to fully fund public schools, to stop funding private schools, and to provide free transport for all students. Social groups have mobilized in Mexico to protest against the severe crisis in the country and to call for benefit and help for the poorest.
Workers, union members, and associations of retirees and neighbors marched toward the Chamber of Deputies, asking for a popular legislation model.
This is about turning people's demands into laws. We tried to get this into Congress, despite the traitors working in there. Together, neighborhoods, towns, and communities are gathering signatures for this.
It's being led by the National Association of Electricity Users, who reject the increase on electricity tariffs and privatization.
What they call modernization is really privatization, and we don't know, they have already sold this to many companies, most of them from other countries. We don't agree with that.
Another great concern is the negative effects on jobs and low pensions. People are calling for reform of the national pension law.
Almost 6 million people will receive no pension in the next years, and some others, around 3 million people, will only receive a pension lower than the minimum wage, which is the same as $100 a month.
This problem motivates people to act against poverty, lived by more than 60 million people, and against the government's attempts to declare social protests as crimes, with laws like the security one that was approved at the end of 2017. They say that elections have distracted the political class from issues that affect Mexican people. According to the organization Latino Barometro, 70% of people don't trust in the upcoming elections set for the 1st of July.
Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, and Twitter are under fire from the Argentine government, following revelations that user information was shared for use by political campaigns. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Sabrina Roth, has the details.
We're following the international scandal in which Facebook users' information has been shared with political campaigns in various countries. In Argentina, Amnesty International complained about the use of Twitter to attack journalists and human rights defenders through trolls and bots. Today, the Commission for Freedom of Expression of the nation's Chamber of Deputies has summoned Facebook, Twitter, and Cambridge Analytica's legal representatives to give their account and analyse the use of social media users' private data.
So we'll take another short break, but join us after this look at what the multimedia team reports.
Love to see a young girl go out and grab the world by the lapels. Life's a bitch. You've got to go out and kick ass.
Welcome back. Israeli forces have shot and wounded 3 Palestinians as new protests are held on Gaza's border with Israel. Thousands of Palestinians have gathered at the border to resume their march of return. This comes a week after at least 20 Palestinians were killed by the Israeli forces. The demonstrators are demanding the Palestinian refugees be allowed to return to their ancestral lands. They are holding a 6-week-long protest in tents along the fence border. A German court has agreed to release on bail former Catalan President Carles Puigdemont. A judge said his extradition to Spain was possible on the basis of corruption charges there, but not on the more serious charge of rebellion. Puigdemont was arrested on entering Germany last month on a Spanish-issued arrest warrant. Spain accused the Catalan separatists of rebellion and corruption after he organized an unsanctioned independence referendum. Let's have a look at some other headlines from around the world.
Ex-South Korean President Park Geun-hye has been sentenced to 24 years in prison with a fine of $17 million by the Seoul Central District Court. She was found guilty on multiple counts of abuse of power, bribery and coercion. 66-year-old Geun-hye became country's first female president in 2013. She was impeached and arrested in 2017 on corruption allegations. The government televised her verdict due to wide public interest in the case.
I'm glad that I was able to watch the verdict live on television as a citizen of the Republic of Korea. I had hoped that the former president, Park Geun-hye, attended to the hearing. It is a shame she was sentenced to 24 years in jail, but I was expecting more years.
In another graft scandal, former South African President Jacob Zuma has been charged with corruption linked to a $2.5 billion arms deal in 1990s. He faces 16 charges including fraud, racketeering and money laundering. 75-year-old Zuma was ousted from office in February this year. He has denied any wrongdoing. Thousands of people in Bratislava, Slovakia, have marched to demand justice for the murder of investigative journalist Jan Kuciak and his fiancée last month. Kuciak had been probing alleged ties between top politicians and the Italian mafia.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. But these stories, you can find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And you can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.